Needlepoint by Justin Richards. When they walked past the coffee bar for the third time, Martha decided that enough was enough. She stopped and folded her arms. The doctor, examining the small gadget he was carrying, didn't notice and kept walking. After about 10 metres he paused and glanced up. Catching sight of Martha, he grinned and waved the gadget at her. It was about the size of a mobile phone, with a dial on the top and a little stubby aerial sticking out. "That's the third time we've walked along here," Martha told him without moving. She let the doctor walk back to her. "I should think so," he said. "Definitely an etheric beam somewhere around here." He held the box up and turned slowly in a circle. "Bit muffled, that's why the signal's weak, but etheric and alien." "Dangerous?" Martha asked. "Well, maybe a 6, 7 perhaps on the danger scale." "Out of how many? 10? I mean, are we talking end of the world or a storm in a coffee cup?" The smell from the coffee bar was rich and inviting. "Probably just a stranded alien gathering etheric energy to power up his ship," the doctor said. "Or," he admitted, "it might be some purely natural blip. Might be a double-decker bus that needs its engine tuning." There was a double-decker bus just turning off the street further along. Martha did not fancy running after it. In fact, the more she smelled the coffee, the more that was what she fancied. She'd sat down on one of the small round tables on the pavement. "How about I leave you to it and you can tell me whether it was Albert Alien or Derek Double-Decker when you're done?" "It won't take long," the doctor insisted. "2 shakes." To prove it, he shook the gadget. Twice. Then he frowned at it. "That can't be right. Tell you what, why don't you wait here and I'll be back when I'm done. It's a nice day, so you just chill." There wasn't much chance of that, Martha thought, as she ordered coffee and a cake. It was a beautiful summer's day, and she moved her chair slightly to bring it into the shade. The town centre was washed with sunlight. She watched the people walking past. A man with a small dog, a woman pushing a pram, an elderly lady, a man and a woman holding hands but arguing, another old lady walking the other way. Or, hang on, it was the same old lady. Martha recognised the hesitant, slightly stiff walk, the way she was a little stooped, the grey-white hair arranged and pinned up, the shapeless brown cardigan and black handbag. Martha smiled at the lady and sipped her coffee. The lady ignored her and continued on her way. After a few minutes, the doctor returned. He was on the other side of the road, still staring at the dial on the gadget. Martha waved, but he didn't see her. In fact, he was so intent on the dial that he didn't even see the person walking towards him and almost bumped into her. Martha laughed out loud as she saw the doctor's apologetic gestures and the glare of the old lady he'd almost knocked off the pavement. The old lady was wearing a shapeless brown cardigan and carrying a black handbag. The same little old lady. Again. But she'd just passed by, heading in the other direction. There was no way the old lady could have got round the block and back on the other side of the road in that time. Not unless she was an Olympic sprinter. Martha stared at the old lady walking hesitantly along again. She was obviously not an Olympic sprinter. How odd. By the time she had seen the old lady several times more, Martha was beyond thinking it was odd. The same old lady went into a shop further along the street. Then she came out of a different shop. Now she was crossing the road at the other end and coming out of the first shop again. What was going on? There was no sign of the doctor, so Martha left the money for her coffee and cake and waited for the old lady to pass by yet again. She did not have long to wait. She let the lady get a few metres ahead, then followed. Did the old lady have a teleport or some ability to zap through space in a moment? There was no sign of it as the old lady went into a shop. It was an antique shop, and Martha could see the old lady walking slowly to the back. Martha waited a moment, then followed her inside. The shop was dusty, run down, and full of what Martha considered to be junk rather than antiques. There were piles of old books, broken bits of furniture, and a sofa that was so faded you couldn't tell what colour it used to be. There was no sign of anyone, so Martha made her way through the shop following the old lady. At the back of the shop was a door, standing slightly open. Martha could hear something from the other side and peered carefully round. The door opened into a large back room. There were several armchairs and a sofa, all in as sorry a condition as the furniture in the shop. Upright chairs were arranged round the walls, but it wasn't the furniture that made Martha's eyes widen in surprise. The room was full of old ladies. There must be about 20 of them, sitting, standing, talking quietly, and knitting, all of them knitting with big, chunky needles. But two things made Martha's heart thump in her chest. First, although the old ladies were knitting, none of them had any wool. And when she looked closely, Martha saw that the needles never touched, just danced around each other in a complicated repeating pattern. The second thing, the one that really got Martha, was that all the old ladies were the same. Exactly the same. She was seeing the exact same old lady, but about 20 times. Time to get the doctor, Martha decided. She turned slowly, quietly away from the door, and found yet another identical old lady standing right behind her. This old lady was holding what looked like a toy space gun, but the way she held it suggested to Martha that it wasn't really a toy, and the person holding it wasn't really an old lady. "Inside, human spy," the old lady said in a cracked, failing voice. "Look what I found outside, spying on us," she said as she and Martha stepped into the room. The old ladies inside went on knitting. "We'll have to kill her, of course," one of them said in the same cracked voice. "If we can spare the power," another added. "Levels are building, but we are still very short of etheric energy," another said. "You're aliens," Martha said, trying to sound like she wasn't at all bothered. "Aliens disguised as little old ladies." Despite the gun jabbing into her back, she couldn't help asking, "What's all that about? And what do you think you're knitting?" The old lady with the gun cackled a laugh. "Knitting? We are gathering energy with the etheric antennae. When we have stored enough power, we shall make our report to the fleet commander." "And what will you report? That shapeless brown cardies are the in fashion here on Earth?" One of the old ladies jabbed a knitting needle at Martha. "Silence, human. Do not let our frail appearance confuse you. We are short of energy, that is why we are gathering more." She returned to knitting furiously. "When we arrived, we had only enough power to create one disguise pattern." "Ah, so that's why you all look the same," Martha realised. "But why do you look like that? Wouldn't be my first choice, I can tell you." "Then you are stupid," the lady with the gun said. "Our analysis of human observational behaviour indicated that this was the best pattern. As far as humans are concerned, all little old ladies look the same. So you failed to notice 20 identical disguised aliens in the same small area. And you will all pay for that mistake when the fleet arrives," another of the ladies said. The ladies slowly stood up, advancing menacingly on Martha, knitting needles whirling in front of them. "All except you," the old lady with the gun told Martha, "because you will already be—" But she got no further, because Martha turned suddenly and knocked the gun aside. A bolt of blue lightning shot across the room and slammed into the wall. Martha grabbed the gun and tried to wrench it free of the old lady's grasp. "Energy discharge," one of the old ladies hissed. "Do not waste the energy. If we don't report, the fleet will move on and abandon this planet." "Sounds good to me," Martha said. She managed to pull the gun away and turned to face the approaching aliens. The old ladies stopped abruptly. At least, the ones at the front did. The ladies behind stumbled and knocked into them. One old lady sprawled on the floor. She dropped her knitting needles with a cry of dismay. Dismay turned to fright as the two knitting needles rolled into each other. All the old ladies shrieking in anguish as a bright green glow suddenly surrounded the needles. Martha backed slowly away. The ladies seemed to be ignoring her now. The green light was spreading and all the knitting needles were glowing. "We are losing energy," one of the ladies shrieked. But her voice was no longer an old lady's. It was deeper, more of a growl, and the lady's face was a shining green and seemed to be melting. All the old ladies were glowing and changing as Martha watched. It was hard to see through the intense green light, but they looked more like huge grasshoppers than old ladies now. Spindly front legs waved desperately in the air. Huge segmented eyes stared angrily at Martha. Then the glow faded, and when it had gone, so had the aliens. No old ladies, no giant grasshoppers, no knitting needles, and no space gun. Outside the shop, the doctor was tapping at the dial on his gadget. He looked up as Martha stepped out into the bright sunshine beside him. "Ah, there you are," he said. "Thought I'd trace etheric energy, but now it seems to have gone." He shook the gadget. "No, nothing. Must have been a blip, or a bloop, or maybe a blarb. You never know." He stuffed the gadget into his coat pocket and grinned at Martha. "Never mind. You been having fun?" "Well, sort of," she said. She wasn't sure where to start, but the doctor was already walking away, hands thrust deep into his coat pockets. He paused outside the next shop. There was a pram outside on the pavement. Martha remembered watching a young woman push it past the coffee bar. By the time she caught up with the doctor, he was grinning at the baby lying in the pram and making coochie-coo noises at it. The baby stared back at him unimpressed. "Mum must have nipped into the shop," Martha said. She smiled at the baby too, amused by its blue eyes and bald head. It was tiny, but at least it would grow up without its planet being invaded by giant grasshoppers. "Come on then," the doctor decided, nudging Martha's shoulder with his own. He still had his hand in his coat pockets. "You know," he said as they walked past another woman pushing another pram, "it's funny how all babies look the same, isn't it?"